What's going on, Restoration Dominators? Rico Garcia here. And today we've got a very, very fun episode. If you like data and if you like to look at massive amounts of information that kind of leave a bread trail or a crumb trail towards why employees stick around, what really matters with company culture, and actually listen to hundreds and thousands of organizations, this is going to be the episode for you. But before we dive in, I want to go ahead and just make a couple of quick public service announcements. Remember, we have 678 Talk to Us. Make sure that you dial the phone number 678 Talk to Us. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your guest suggestions. And yeah, we just want to go ahead and hear from you. I mean, obviously, you are the one that makes this podcast and this production possible. And we also want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to have a shout out on the show. So if you have any questions for our guest, if you have any commentary, we'd love to hear from you. Just so pick up the phone, shoot us a call at 678 Talk, the number 2, us, and leave us a voicemail, and then we'll pull that audio and we'll bring it into the podcast. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to our show sponsors. Of course, you cannot forget about our 2 platinum sponsors with the Legal Corner as well as the Public Adjusting Corner. We are joined once a month by Lawyer Brit, bringing us all things legal, as well as Carlos Machine, the claims machine, talking about all things public adjusting, and also some of the changes along the way in the landscape and how this could affect you, your business, as well as your clients. Big shout out to CNR Magazine. As per usual, go on over to cnrmagazine.com, get your subscription. Just if you haven't gotten it, what are you waiting for? Just go get your subscription. Also, a big shout out to Company Cam. Again, as per usual, we'll go ahead and talk about them a little bit later on as well. And last but certainly not least, Impartial. Big shout out to Impartial, which, by the way, awesome technology. You guys need to look into that if you haven't used it yet. So let's talk about today's episode because it's tons of fun. Today we're going to be joined by Leighton from KnowHow. He was actually recently, I think, on the cover of CNR Magazine, where we were talking about this entire type of scenario where they've got just so much data that they were able to gather to determine like what makes, team members stick around, what makes team members leave, what makes them look for other opportunities, the importance of company culture. And we really take a little bit of a deep dive with regards to all things related to personnel and company growth, as well as company culture. Company culture nowadays is one of these topics where it's kind of like a buzzword, right? Everybody's throwing it around, but very few people take the time to study and to identify what really makes for good company culture. And a lot of times as business owners, we're not taking a step back and listening to what our people and what our team members are saying, right? And the really cool thing about this episode is the amount of data that they were able to gather across so many different areas, so many different types of leadership. And we really get into the weeds with regards to perspective and with, older management, new ways of hiring and what people are really looking for and the mission that they're looking to serve so that you can go ahead and continue to grow your business and expand. So Leighton had tons of great information. This is a great show. So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right, guys, what's up? Leighton, what's up, brother? Thank you so much for jumping on today, being on the show. Are you ready to help us dominate?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great to be here. Excited to help your listeners and got lots of tactical things where they'll be able to throw this in the tank and move the needle. So happy to be here.
Awesome, man. And I love, you've obviously listened to the show before. You know how much I love the tactical advice, things that people could actually like walk away and start implementing in their business, right? Because again, and you've done so many studies and seen so much data, and data is so powerful that it's typically the small things, right? Just this compounding effect of the small things that really move the needle for businesses of any size, whether you're just starting off or if you're a multi-state, multi-million-dollar organization. So do me a favor, man. Before we kind of get into everything that we're going to talk about today, fill in some of the gaps on the intro for the viewers and the listeners that just have never heard of the name, have never heard of KnowHow. Kind of give us a quick little snapshot of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My name is Leighton. I'm with the team at KnowHow, and we are a software company that specializes in helping restoration, construction, really labor-intensive businesses to be able to scale faster, to be able to take back, management time that's often spent just being a frequently asked question machine in your workforce. And we do that by helping companies that are industries like your listeners work in to be able to make the shift from being kind of like the Wild West, where sometimes you kind of wing it every day, to being what we like to refer to as a process-driven company, a company that operates more like a sports team out of a shared playbook than just a bunch of people running around in the playground, hoping that we're going to move the ball ahead. And so there's 6 mountains that lie between where your listener is today and being like this growth machine. And we specialize in helping them to get to the other side of those mountains. And we are the digital plumbing that powers the fastest growing restoration companies in the industry right now.
Awesome. And we're going to take what I feel is going to be a rather deep dive into this quote unquote plumbing and the systems and how to do all of that. But before we get into the technical and the software and exactly how you guys help restoration companies kind of get through these, over these 6 mountains, right? You guys did a ridiculous study, which as a matter of fact, I believe it was featured on the cover story of C&R magazine, the March, April edition. So talk to us about that. What was that all about?
What it's about is it's the biggest challenge in the restoration in any labor industry. So November last year, right, 2021, we hit a high mark. We hit a high mark of the most individuals in labor industries that just self opted to just walk off the job and say, you know what, I don't need this. And it was a high mark. It was nearly 5 million people from the U.S. And that's a very significant number because, and you've probably heard, like there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of, I would say, dialogue around what was the catalyst behind that. But we're a very analytical software company. It's really our ambition to help growing companies to be able to win with the changing dynamic of the workforce today. Because, Rico, you have this amazing podcast, but also you're a business owner and you know that labor workers today are different when labor workers 10, 15 years ago. It's just a different profile. And there's a lot of things that influence that. So rather than us just kind of leaning on some of these kind of subjective, I think this is why it is. And, I had my own biases. I've been in these types of industries for a lot of years. We said, you know what, we're going to do a very deep research project to understand right from the voice of these individuals, what are the reasons why people are leaving their jobs and is there anything we can do about it? And so we partnered with a lot of leading brands in the industry. I can rattle them off, but they're organizations that everybody goes to conferences to listen to them on stage and stuff like that. And we put our arms together and we said, let's do this. And we launched a survey. It was a very thorough survey, over 50 different questions, anonymous, and it allowed individuals in all roles within restoration companies across all 50 U.S. states to be able to really speak their mind confidentially. And we had hundreds of responses, and it led to thousands and thousands of rows of data. And fortunately, as a software company, we have a lot of analytical people. And so, we did some pretty serious analytical judo, and we're able to identify some very significant patterns, trends, and really insights that I believe your listeners will find super interesting, and I can share a lot of that today. But the most important thing is this: is that the future is going to be subdivided into two different communities. It's going to be subdivided into companies that adapt to the very different profile of the incoming labor worker, and those who really dig in their heels and don't. And those who don't are going to be consistently fighting over a shorter and shorter and smaller pool of a very particular type of worker who will put up with some of the old ways of doing things. So I'm here to throw back the curtains and say, hey, the industry's been around for a lot of years, decades and decades. I can tell you, like, from the mouths of hundreds of people in the industry, how you can become an employer of choice and create an environment where you really build and maintain an A caliber team.
Right. And this has been one of the hottest topics when it comes down to employee retention and labor shortages and, everything that's happened. Again, this is a service-based business and it takes human bodies, at least it does for right now. Right. And that without good quality personnel, it's nearly impossible to, number one, grow a business, and in most cases, even maintain a business. So due to the study, like, what were some of the biggest, shocking factors that when you looked at the study and you looked at the results, was there anything that kind of just said, knocked your socks off and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought that this was like a major factor. Was there anything like that just really stood out?
Oh, tons. Like, where do I start? Let me start by saying, hey, who knew that nearly 50%, 48% of new individuals that entered the restoration industry in the last 18 months were women, all ranks. And so one of the fastest growing segments in the restoration industry are women moving into the industry, and not just moving into, say, office administrative roles, but moving into field-based roles. And then when you dig into these companies we asked a lot of questions around, what are some of the things your company does or doesn't do to accommodate women in the workplace. I'll tell you, you could walk away from this podcast right now and just say, hey, just make your office a better place for women to work at, and you'll do super well, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's a huge component of it. I think another thing is that surprised us is that the majority of workers, contrary to popular belief, the majority of people in all roles in restoration come from their job before being in restoration came from or from their current job came from outside of restoration. So this whole notion that we're just nabbing people from this, this shrinking pool, and it's really just about talent stealing. Some of that is happening, make no mistake, but the majority of workers said that actually, no, I came from an industry that was actually completely outside of construction. So what that means is that a lot more people are coming from Burger King than from swinging a hammer over here. So that has a lot of relevancy for what we do, because we're very interested in big macro trends, Rico, where never has there been more opportunity for labor-based companies, for service and construction-based companies. Never has there been more regulation, aka the need to prove that it was done the right way. But you also have this aging workforce where you have a lot of the head knowledge is on their way out, and they're not writing a lot of manuscripts on how to do their job. They're just like, you know what, I've been here long enough, I'm out.
Right.
And then you have this incoming wave of people who, again, the data doesn't lie. It says that the majority of people coming into the industry are coming from roles that were not in construction, meaning that they've never worn tools to work. And the industry is kind of at a bit of a crossroads where it has an opportunity influx, but a skill crisis. And so a lot of that came through very clearly in the data.
Right. So what was the one aspect, right? So this is really interesting, right? Because if you would have told me, there's a huge influx of women coming into the workforce, like the field work, that's like an interesting data point, right? I mean, look, I believe that, more women should be in the business, right? I mean, I think that just does great things for the business, and even on, the consumer sentiment side of things. There's just so many benefits that come along with that. But what did you find as far as the data, right? What did the data tell you as to why people are just kind of throwing in the towel and saying, you know what, forget this place, I don't want to be here anymore, and they just walk away?
Yeah, so it won't surprise you, but the number one reason is, I'm not quitting this business, I'm quitting my boss.
Right.
I'm quitting my manager. And so we called it was so significant, and it was so, I would say it was so unanimous, that we just called it, it's like the chasm. is that I don't know if there's ever been a point where there's been such a deep disconnect between, I would say, workers that don't have reports, people that report to them. That's probably just a good catch-all, and people who have reports, right? And I mean, I would say, just broad strokes, and then we can dig in. But on one side, you have people who are quite dug in on the management side who are saying, good people don't quit, or this is an industry where you've got to kind of like make it through the fire, and if you don't, then you know what, you don't have what it takes. And you know what, if that sounds like, if one of your listeners says amen to that, I don't disagree with you, but the problem is that's just an old way of thinking, and workers today won't put up with it, right? And that old way of thinking is really what allows us to accommodate poor onboarding, insufficient training, a worker, in their first 30 days, which we could talk about. That's a huge, competitive opportunities to influence the first 30 days. A worker feeling unsupported. Gone are the days where you had a generation who had this kind of long-term perspective of saying, life is all about overcoming obstacles and being tenacious and really being steadfast. This generation is not really that interested in that. They said, hey, the first 30 days is kind of like a date, and the first 30 days is chaotic. I see that as a projection of what the next 300 days are going to be like, and I'm out of here. And so I would say what you see is this entrenchment on either side. And people, I was talking to a person who designs, customer experiences for airlines the other, a number of months ago. And I asked her, I put it to her, I said, hey, in the industries that we serve, disaster restoration, property construction, all these different areas, I said, who has to meet in the middle? And she said, it's not about meeting in the middle. It's at the leadership and management. It falls to them. They need to cross the chasm. They need to come to their side. Otherwise, they're going to become irrelevant. And you're right. You said a comment earlier. You said, there's a lot of technology changing, and we really believe it. It's only a matter of years before things like machine learning and whatnot will start to replace roles like accounting and finance and stuff like that. But we are decades away from a robot installing a toilet.
Right, exactly. So obviously there's a lot of data, and I don't know how you guys captured all of this data or how you cross-referenced it, but I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, did you see in the data, was there a point where it was an age factor of management? Like this older, quote unquote, older school type of mentality, like, hey, you just got to push through it, and the younger aged management group? And was there a relationship there with regards to how people would stick around? In other words, was it an upright, the way that they were brought up? Was it a way in which, they just view the world, or is there so much of a disconnect? Because again, there's a lot of, if you're talking to a 55-year-old male, it's going to be a little bit different than speaking to a 25-year-old male who's in a management position, right? It's just, you would expect that to be true. So my question would be, is when you guys were looking at this data, was that a line that you guys were trying to figure out, or did that not necessarily show up?
No, it's a good question, because everything we did was very sensitive to the fact that different generations, you've probably heard these terms, Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, boomers, and then there's even further segmentation. There's early boomers, late Gen X, or, there's all these segmentation, and we've probably all read something or heard something anecdotally about these generations, and it seems like every new generation is too entitled or whatnot. So to your question is, do we think that there was just some generational things going on here? Absolutely. There's absolutely some things that are happening generationally. Now, any demographer who studies population groups and whatnot will tell you that a very interesting cycle. If you've ever seen a wave come in, and then you see the riptide follow it, and it kind of draws water out before it kind of pushes water in. In the same way, something really interesting happens in workforces, is that you think that when a bunch of young people come into the workforce, they'll very quickly adapt to the old established way of doing things. But technology is a great example, Rico, where that doesn't actually really happen, in that oftentimes the new generation is bringing in new technology, new ways of thinking, new kind of ways of dressing and acting and lingo and terminology. And what you see is you start to see almost generation by generation quickly adapts to some of the new, almost marching instructions brought in by the young generation. And then you have areas of entrenchment. And so are some of the deep entrenched perspectives tied to age groups? Absolutely. I'm sure maybe Rico, you're someone who I would say has a higher hustle factor than the average person I come across, and so I'm sure people have often said you act a little older than your age, Rico. I'm sure throughout your life people said, "Man, Rico, you act a lot older than your age,"
Yeah.
right? And so there are people that I would say probably act more like like the characteristics of a particular age profile. But what we looked at in the data was we absolutely did a lot of cross correlation between, okay, well, this is interesting. So these are the perspectives of this response. And let's look at that not based only on age, but based on role in the company. So office administrators who were, say, women ages 29 to 39, they think very differently than, say, field-based workers who are between 19 and 26 and are male. Like it's not just only the age group, but that maybe a better way to compare it is that you take that same age group and you just put them in a different role in the company and they're different as well. And so, at the end of the day, it's complicated, right? It's complicated because there's really no one size fits all solution. Is that what the data tells us is that almost within each department, you need to just be alert and be cognizant that there are different things that motivate staff, different things that drive staff out the door. There are different things that I would say make work more fulfilling and less fulfilling based on all these things. And so you say, how do I keep all these things straight? And I'd say, well, someone who's new to restoration, they would say, how do you keep all these policies straight? How do you keep all this equipment straight? You know how to service all of these. You're like, it takes time. You have to be
Right.
intentional about it.
Right.
And the reality is that this is an industry who understands multifaceted dynamics. There are some companies I would say that just push a lawnmower all day that I agree it's going to be difficult because they haven't had to think at that spectrum. But that's why. I mean, I was at RIA last week and I got to hang out with a lot of some of the leading HR experts in the industry. Yeah, and they're thinking at a level of, I would say, kind of workforce dynamism that is I think would really just cause a lot of people in the industry 15 years ago to kind of their eyes to glaze over. So like, you're overcomplicating it.
Right.
And they'd say, you know what? Mold is complicated. People, way more complicated.
Correct. Yeah. So kind of giving us the magic pill, right? Because we know that there's all of these different reasons why it's very difficult to retain people and or to attract people, especially good quality people. So, because I'm sure that there's so much data, we could probably go off on tangents for the next 6-7 hours, just kind of unpacking all of this data. So from the data that you did analyze, right? And from the responses that you received, what are some of the common denominators of the great employers, great organizations? What are they doing to make employees and team members feel like they're not just, some guy who's cutting out drywall or some girl who's answering the phone or just some cog in the wheel, right? Like what is that big difference that if you could say, hey, look, Rico, you're starting a restoration company or you're trying to grow your restoration company, from everything that I've learned, these are the top things that I would strongly recommend for you to look at based on the data to have a happier staff that is potentially going to be a cheerleader to bring additional people on board.
Yeah, no, let's get super practical. And so, this is the proverbial person listening, take out your pencil moment. So number one is that when you're hiring staff, particularly for administrative roles, make time for real human connection. What that means is that in all the hustle and bustle, few things came up more and more in the data for office administrative people that led to retention and led to job fulfillment than the relationships of their colleagues. And so a lot of people are thinking about taking those people remote. That's up to you. But the reality is that if you're not thinking about how those individuals are connecting and remaining socially connected, things like making sure that an office administrator's birthday is never missed. There's just those really practical things is so important at that level. It's just off the Richter scale with people in office administrators is that more than salary, more than compensation, more than even good management, it's the relationships of the people that they work with. So if you are someone where you just you kind of just allow office environments to just kind of naturally happen, you're gonna have to take a very serious cultivator kind of gardener role. If you have somebody who's they're the best at processing claims, but they're really, I would say, just this conflictive person who's always rubbing everyone the wrong way in the office, get rid of them, right? Because you are going to drive people out the door unless you have a harmonious and very, I would say, deep kind of team-based environment in your office space, right? Now, let's talk about young workers. So young workers in the field, the number one thing that brought them in the door was a referral from friends, peers. So 48% of new people that entered into those roles came from a referral. And so if you don't have a referral program with your staff, then you're totally missing out. So what is a referral program? A referral program looks like something like this. Some of the companies we work with, it's like a cash payment. Someone comes in the door. I'm a big believer in associating a honeymoon period with that cash payment, meaning that, if that worker, after 30 days or after 60 days or something like that. So some type of a referral program. Also is that we're seeing people that what's bringing them in the door is compensation. And so you'll say, well, how do I compete with the guy across the street? I can't pay as much hourly. Well, the good news is that just after somebody said what motivated you to take the job, field-based workers were the highest to say it was the compensation. But later, when you survey that same group and you say, what was the most fulfilling part of the work for you? It was actually the restoration work itself, meaning actually restoring a person's life and seeing the work go from chaos to order. So what does that mean? It means if you can't compete dollar for dollar with a guy across the street, take photos, before and after photos, and say, hey, look, I realize that, you could probably make $1 more across the street, but I want to show you the lives we transform. I want to show you like what the work actually looks like. I want to tell you about 2 of our last clients. These are the Smiths family. And so that ability to know that there's fulfilling work there is a huge thing, right? So it's another practical element. Another practical thing I think that if you said, I'm starting a restoration company tomorrow, what should I do? Is that from day one, institute rituals. What do I mean by rituals? Am I asking you to join the Eastern Orthodox Church here? No, what I'm talking about is, for example, I don't know, if you had a chance to connect with Eric and Larry over at, Morning Tech Meeting, but, they're really onto something there. It's that ability that when you look into the data, what really keeps workers around is the relationship that they would be quitting if they left the role. And so that ability of having, even in a chaotic industry, of saying, in the chaotic industry, we still will have a short 10-minute stand-up meeting as a group every day, even if it's just a call that you have to call into. And we're just going to have a bit of a ritual of saying, hey, what got done yesterday? What's your focus for today? What's something you need help with today? Or, hey, what was something fulfilling yesterday? Or just those little cadences. And you'll say, well, my team's not going to go for that. It doesn't matter. It's just that they're together and in a routine. Other things, I can keep rattling here, but there's some very practical things you could do. Is that falling in line?
Yeah, absolutely. So several things that I wanted to go ahead and yes, the Morning Tech Meeting, I just had him on the podcast recently, which as a matter of fact, I think his episode may be dropping right before this one. And it was funny because talking about those rituals, he mentions on the podcast actually where he had to stop for like a week and a half. And it was like total disarray in the company, right? Like back when he was doing it. And that's where he just realized like the importance of rituals and the importance of having this, daily practice. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in the rituals. As far as the compensation that you mentioned, there's so many creative ways and stuff that we've talked about previously on the podcast, right? It's trying to find creative ways to compensate individuals for the work that they do, because there's always an extra dollar that you could find. If you like, hey, if so and so across the street is, short staffed, maybe they are more than willing to pay an additional $5 an hour or $2 an hour, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a better move, but if there's not something else that you've created for this employee or this manager, this project manager, whoever the role is, it's very easy to be like, oh, well, pound for pound, it's all the same stuff, so I'm just go over there. I'm actually writing a piece which is, it's a little clickbaity, but it's using the power of how the word manipulative makes people feel, right? Because naturally it's like, oh my God, it's manipulative. But some of the most successful business owners and or organizations are master manipulators. Now, again, that's not bad. It just means that they're finding ways to manipulate the environment, to have this cohesive environment, right? So just finding these cool little things. And then the referral fees, I think is amazing. But now, how do companies organize, a structure to get these referral, their existing labor force to go out there and, kind of be a cheerleader for the organization, because that in and of itself is kind of its own mechanism as well, right? So you need to have, this full circle, the company culture, how they make you feel, the compensation, and then all of these other programs to still recruit new talent, right?
And absolutely. I mean, your comment earlier about the manipulation, what I always like to point out is that the biggest difference is intent, right? The big difference between the manipulation and persuasion is what's the intent behind it. And no question, like a big part of any leader and a big part of anyone who's listening to this and says, hey, I've been listening to you for months, and I want to implement things. They are in the business of persuasion, right? They are the business of helping someone discover value in moving a predetermined direction, right? And
Exactly.
and you're 100% right. And it's how you do that, I would say, with noble intention. I think at the end of the day is really where you put your money. Now, in terms of, I mean, does that align with what I think
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So what are the like key things, right, that you think, based on the data that you looked at, where you're like, man, people are really, really missing the boat here, right? And, I believe that there's a big dynamic going on when it comes down to the labor force or the existing labor force. And part of that is technology, right? And secondly, it's the messaging. The messaging is really important, because if you look at the majority of the labor force, that we're marketing to, which, by the way, the restoration industry is horrible at, in my opinion, horrible at marketing new talent.
Yeah.
And you're competing against all of the laptop lifestyle. You're competing against Bitcoin and NFT trading and fulfillment by Amazon and all of these other things, which, by the way, all work and are all really amazing. And if, we live in a social media society today where you look at and start scrolling, you're like, I want a Lambo, and this is like, a 19, 21, 22, 25-year-old kid. It's like, man, but I don't, they're dressed really nice and, they're going to the club. I don't want to be dirty with drywall and in a van. Like, that's not what I want. Right. So how much of that affects the hiring capabilities and the pool that you're going to? Because when you look at the glitz and the glam that everybody's being pitched, right? And you look at how non-glamorous, for the most part, the restoration industry is, we can dress it up and we can create a great story about the great deeds that we do about, hey, well, we didn't pay you that much, but you put Susie's life back together again, right? Like, yeah, that's all nice, but how do you compete with that message that's constantly going out there?
Well, I think it's a fair question. I think that one of the things is that it's not apples with apples. So, for example, sometimes I talk with some of our clients who, have really got deep into learning management systems, and they're saying, "Wow, our people won't use our LMS system, and we're really struggling. We put hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars into this thing. What do you have to say?" And I say, "Well, you have to understand, it's not apples with apples. What you're competing with is five massive technology companies who pay 25,000 engineers $250,000 a year to, in a sense, build technology that makes knowledge serve us like a little servant, right? And so
Right.
your LMS system is never going to compete with this massive wave of what we would call consumer preference. And so similarly, what you're describing is a lot of horsepower behind that lifestyle marketing, right? And the good news is that there's enough people that I think have taken the bait and clicked on the thing and, and really burned through a lot of their cash in some, get rich quick scheme thing, to realize that that some people can figure it out, but most people won't. And the reality is that being part of a team that does meaningful work, where if you're not there, people notice, is something that I think the restoration industry can really advertise. And the restoration industry is not the only industry that struggles to tell its story. So let me maybe just add some practical elements to that. Is that one of the things that changed in the worker profile, particularly the young workers coming in. So these are workers that are anywhere from, probably 19 to 26, is that the pandemic had a very big impact. And one of the things that the pandemic did is that it really revealed, I would say, the shallowness of a lot of the relational ties that the average young person has, and heck, all of us have. And it really, in a sense, had a big sizable impact that the result of it all, right? The result of it all. So a couple interesting points, the young workforce coming in, most likely to not be connected with a faith-based community, most likely to not be connected with a volunteer organization, most likely, they've recently left whatever school they were from, whether it was secondary or post-secondary. And so they really experienced a lot of disconnection. And so what does that mean is that they came to work with an expectation that some managers aren't comfortable with, Rico, which is they come with the expectation that I want a place in a community where I can belong. And that ability of facilitating an environment where actually maybe people around the work table talk about stuff at home more than you're comfortable with. But at the end of the day, for the average young worker coming in, they don't have anywhere else where they talk about that. They don't have like a watering hole. And so one of the things that solopreneur, building an Amazon empire doesn't have is they don't have deep, genuine social connections. And the reality is that the average restoration company would net make more money if they did a barbecue once a week where they just kind of goofed off than taking one more job. And that's just the brass tacks of it, is that what we're seeing is that the young workers coming in, there's really 5 things that they're looking for, Rico. The number one is they want to be able to say, what will I have that I don't have now? Because I just don't have the foresight to understand what I'll have. And so absolutely, sometimes you'll have restoration companies who will show before and after pictures of their work, but I've never run across a restoration company that actually shows the before and after of what people who put time into your company, what spits out the other side 2 years later.
Right.
Look at the skills that she has that she didn't have before. Look at the softwares that she's competent in. Look at the equipment that she can manage. Look at the tools that she can use. Look at just the practical skills. She knows how to be able to, de-escalate highly stressful environments with people. That's a very practical life skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that ability to put in front of someone saying, look, I'm never going to be as cool and as sexy as this guy who says he reads a book a week. But let me tell you this. If you invest 2 years in my company, this is what your resume will look like. Let's look at yours. It's the pits. This is what you'll have that you don't have now. I hope that you'll be able to invest that in helping me grow this company. But you put a year of your life in, you put 2 years of your life, and let me show you very practically what you'll have that you don't have now. And that appeal of saying, look at the advancement opportunity. I'm not just talking about, then you'll have this role, then you'll have this role, then you'll have this role. I'm talking about
titles, right? Which for a lot of people just are like, like everybody get it. Like, we get it.
What I want is competencies. And there's a whole whack of competencies. I did a lot of work with the Olympic teams around helping them understand how you transition the sports skill set to the marketplace. Because after like 15 years in sport, and they have gold medals dangling around their neck, they'd say, I got to go in the marketplace. I'm useless. And I say, okay, hold on a second. What you called the ability to say, build an entire week workout plan in the marketplace, we call that price management. And I'll tell you, it's super valuable, right? They're like, oh, really? Right. So a lot of it is just helping a young person see just the practical developmental opportunities that lie in front of them. And you don't need to have a whole learning program in your company. The fact of the matter is that after 10 times of helping a customer go through the transition curve of their home being destroyed, if you approach it, I would say with some empathy, you approach it with some professionalism, there are skills gained in there that can help you in almost any industry. So anyways, that's number one. The second thing is that as quickly as possible, you want to be, whenever you bring in a new hire, you want to avoid having that hire's first day be on the day when everyone's out of the shop or everyone's out of the office, right? Even if it means you've got to delay someone's start, get your staff to start on those days where they start surrounded with people, because it's easy to quit a job. It's hard to quit people, right? Especially people that you like and people that you're connected with. The other thing is that,
and getting your ducks in a row, I would imagine, because again, one of the biggest things that really turns employees off is they show up for the first day and they have no clue what to go. I mean, it's stepping into anywhere and not feeling comfortable, like not knowing what to expect. It's kind of daunting to begin with, but like not having, if you're supposed to get a phone and you're supposed to get a desk, or you're supposed to get like whatever it is that you're supposed to get, and people aren't ready for you, you just kind of feel like so awkward, right? Yeah. So just making it almost like a welcoming experience, right?
Yeah.
That first impression does really go a long way.
Oh, 100%. And hey, just a nice segue, because this is a big part of why we did the research, is because, we aspire to be the software of choice to help companies win with the worker today. And so, but hands down, if your listener's still with us, hands down, one of the best ways for you to be an employer of choice is to be able to really provide a world-class first 30 days where there's a standardized onboarding process, where there's a clear development path, where when they have questions, the resources are quickly at hand. And that's a big part of what we do at KnowHow, is that, we're a software company that facilitates onboarding process, facilitates your development plan. It facilitates, all those just-in-time questions about, how to use this piece of equipment, how to handle that situation, how to deal with the water, how to make the flood cuts, how to use the Matterport thingy. It's like, at the end of the day, so much of how a worker feels when they go home at the end of the day. Do they feel defeated, overwhelmed? Do they feel like they had this like mental just workout all day, just trying to figure out, who do I call? You nailed it, Rico.
One.
It just causes.
That's a huge one.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a couple of more points there, but as a matter of fact, and what we'll do, I think that this will be probably good. Maybe what we'll do is we'll take a written format of the additional 3 bullet points that we were going to cover, because you said there was 5, right? So if you want to get the rest of the bullet points, what we'll do is in the show notes below, there's going to be a link where we can go ahead and kind of give you the 5 bullet points of this entire idea and thinking. But meanwhile, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a quick moment. We're going to thank our sponsors, and then we're going to jump into a little bit more of the nitty gritty, the actual software, how you as a restoration business and restoration business owner or manager, how you can leverage technology to having a better and more coherent team all the way around. So stick around. Let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. Hey, Restoration Nation. So real quick, I want to talk about your estimates. And being in the restoration industry, look, we have to make sure that our documentation is super tight and it's on point. And we want to eliminate as much back and forth with the insurance carrier as much as we possibly can. And this is why I want to talk to you about Impartial. And I really love the name because it's supposed to be impartial. Kind of get it? So the reason why this is such an amazing software is because it uses the technology that most of us are already using, which is the Matterport technology, and then basically makes this on steroids when it comes down to building your estimates. And Impartial has 3 main offerings that I want to talk to you about real quick, starting off with Impartial Scope. Now, when we're talking about Impartial Scope basically allows you to generate a carrier-approved worthy estimate. And basically the way that it does this is by extracting all of the relevant data from pre-mitigation as well as your post-mitigation scans, and packages this up in such an amazing way to where it eliminates so much back and forth. And again, the whole idea as our industry evolves is to harness the power of this kind of technology. Not only that, but it also has another offering, which is Impartial Embed. And basically what this does is it gives you the ability to go ahead and tag with highlights, your general scope notes, mitigation activity, moisture readings, and so much more information. You even have the ability to go ahead and upload JPEG pictures, PNG, ESX, and so much more right into the Impartial tags, which makes your documentation that much more tight, which ultimately leaves less room for people on the other end to have much of an opinion as to what your estimate is about. Because again, this is all about harnessing real physical data. So not only that, there's obviously a lot of industries or a lot of instances where you're going to need to make some changes to your estimate. And lately what we've been seeing is a lot of back and forth between Xactimate and Symbility, which leads us to Impartial Convert, where it basically takes any estimate and can change it between Xactimate and Symbility and vice versa, and really makes this entire process very, very easy. And we've got something really special for you, Restoration Nation, for listening to the show, watching the show. And it's an amazing offer that I want to go ahead and extend to you. And that is, if you head on over to info@impartial, and that's impartial.io/domination. And again, the link is going to be in the video description as well as in the show notes below. You're going to get an amazing offer, and that is a total of 99% off their enterprise plan. So just go ahead and visit info.impartial.io/domination. Go ahead, check them out. You're going to be happy you did. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from time-stamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate, get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right, guys, we're back. We're back. So much to cover. So much to cover. And I love these conversations because these really are the conversations that move the needle, I feel, right? Especially when look, this is hard work. You know, I mean, tons of different size organizations listen to our show and watch our stuff online. And, you know, some of these have huge employee bases, and some of them are just getting started in the business, right? And it's just them in a truck, and it's very, very difficult to grow. And none of it happens without good quality people. And what I know has happened a lot in the industry is there's no lack of good technicians. There's tons and tons of great technicians that have made the transition to a quote unquote business owner. They're like, oh, well, I'm really good at, cutting drywall and laying down a fan. I'll just open up my business. But there's this whole other set of soft skills. And there's also, even more important than the soft skills, which I think should be something that should be developed. And that should be basically a lifelong journey, right? Just developing and always constantly getting better. But the other part is everything that made you a good technician, right? How does that look like? Yeah. And a lot of times what I've found is business owners and or hiring managers, they want to train people by proxy. In other words, hey, I'm going to put you in a truck with Joe, just mimic Joe. Well, Joe's got 10 years of experience as to maybe he's been with your company for that long. Yeah. So he understands exactly how you like it, why you're doing what you're doing, et cetera. And then you've got this kind of like outside person that's just kind of like watching from the outside in, and they're making their own assumptions and ideas as to why, Joe, that, he was teamed up with, why he's doing it that way, right? And of course, it's kind of like, what do you call that game, the telephone, where you would say one thing on one side, and then by the time it got around to you again, it was totally different because the interpretation starts to change. And in that, the company mission kind of gets diluted. The reason why you're doing what it is that you're doing and how the intent in which you're supposed to service people, and more importantly, the formula of why you're supposed to do what you do, whether that's, hey, when you get to the house, you do this, and then for documentation purposes, you do this, because you may not even get paid, right? So getting things out of people's heads and getting them out of different departments and in this centralized location where it's easily accessible, that's what you guys have done really, really well. So kind of unpack that for us, right? Give us a 30,000 foot view And then let's go ahead and do a deep dive.
Absolutely. So probably Michael Gerber was the person who talked about the E-myth, and he talked about this E-myth, which was really talked about this entrepreneurial seizure that tends to capture people where they think they're an entrepreneur, they think they're a business owner. Really, all they've done is they've built for them a super stressful job that they would not wish upon their worst enemy, right? And it's not a scalable business, not a sellable business. It's basically that every time you add someone to your company, it's like you attach an umbilical cord to them, and it's like a parasitic relationship where they rely on you for every go no go, all the know-how, all the know, you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
we didn't come up with the idea, Rico, that really, just like a sports team. Can you imagine every time a project manager shows up, there's like a different set of rules. Every time like a different quarterback out on the field, there's like a different set of rules. It's like, how can a team even operate? There's 100 joules of energy, and if 40 to 50% of those joules have to be committed to say, what are the rules? How do you want this done? Okay, well, that's not how so and so said it. You're just wasting human energy. And so our focus is humans work best when there's shared rules, when there's a playbook, when energy is put towards more of a unified approach, more around just kind of excellence in executing a playbook, than it is about us each having our own individual approach to things. When I go to, I don't know, Burger King, I don't want to get that person's impression of the Whopper or their take on the Whopper. I want a standardized experience, and that's how you build excellence. So at the end of the day, what we do at KnowHow is the first thing we do is we help a busy, moving, active company in labor-intensive industries to be able to actually define the way I want things done, right? And we have a very unique approach, and we do it very rapidly, and we have a great reputation as being a company that helps busy trades-based industries cross what we call the 6 mountains, become a process-driven company. Some people get over the first mountain on their own. Some people get over like the 4th mountain on their own. But again, we've been doing this for a long time, and I don't know if we've run across a company, and we deal with big ones and small ones, that have actually gotten over all of the obstacles to be a company that's more like a machine than it is like the Wild West.
So let's talk about, if you don't mind, would you mind sharing, because I know people are going to want to know, what exactly are these 6 mountains? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so the first one is that you do in fact need to document things. And so now everyone knows that you should document your processes, but the challenge with the documentation is that the format through which you document them, meaning even just the language of how you word them. One guy writes an essay, another guy writes this kind of napkin style how-to, and at the end of the day, the worker, if they can't look at it and know immediately what they need to do, it's not a sufficient document. The second thing is that you need to be able to make that process, make the way you want something done available to the worker in a format that matches their personal preferences, right? And so I mean, the reality is that nowadays, if you are giving someone instruction in a binder, in kind of an old SharePoint folder or whatnot, a worker's not going to use that. They're going to think that you're an outdated, boring business, and they're going to go work somewhere else. The reality is that they'll forget their lunch on the table at home, but they won't forget their phone. And so
Right.
it's really critical that the way you communicate how you want things done looks a lot more like Instagram than it does like some dusty binder that's been used as a ladder level. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The third thing is that, and it's very important that you understand that workers today, English is very likely not the language that they read in, right? And so you also need a tool that accommodates to the changing nature of workers' language requirements. That's a big component of it. And then from there, another mountain is that the way you do things changes, it evolves over time. And so if you can't instantly change the way that you are doing things so that it's always current, you're always going to be in this situation saying, I know the binder says this, but not really like that, but you should follow it, right?
Right. So the importance of having like a living
A
document,
living
which
document.
most organizations just don't have. If they have gone
Mhm.
through the headache and the stress or whatever to actually put pen to paper and write out their policies, that's kind of something that happened once and then they don't touch it again, right?
Totally. And so, so in a nutshell, if you cannot make sure that your workers always have access to the current way of doing things, and COVID threw this all out the window. I mean, it made almost every SOP binder irrelevant, right? Is that you're going to not build trust into your company's how-to. And when a person is looking at a roadmap and they're like, I don't even know if this is actually the way that, like, I could do this and I still might get in trouble, or I may not actually deliver on that SLA requirement. At the end of the day, it's going to breed distrust in the way your company operates, and people are just going to wing it. The fifth one is that if I have finally taken the leap of faith to take my hands off the tools, right, and allow a worker to be able to work autonomously, I want to know if they're doing it the right way when I'm not there. And so monitoring, the ability of real-time monitoring, who did it, when did they do it, where were they standing when they did it? Attach a photo to prove that you did it the right way. That ability to have monitoring is a really important component. And then the final mountain, Rico, which we think is actually, for some companies, it's the easiest, for some, it's the steepest, is the mindset of your management team. One person saying, well, if you suck my brain of everything that I do on a daily basis, you're going to fire me right away. Talk about an old school mentality, right? Someone who's just been a frequently asked question machine their whole life, and they don't realize that actually a manager, supervisor, their job is actually to optimize process, drive growth and expansion, take on opportunities, and to develop people, not to micromanage humans and babysit adults. And
Right.
But it takes time to kind of get your team into this new way of thinking that actually we need to be more systems driven than people driven. We need to be more process driven than people dependent. And I'll tell you, the easiest way to get your management team on board, in my experience, is to basically just get the spouses on board. You say, hey, wouldn't it be great if like dinner with the kids wasn't interrupted because your partner wasn't the only one who knows how to like turn that thing off? Wouldn't it be amazing if your vacations were actually vacations? You weren't pulled into calls because the only source of where that know-how lives is in your partner's brain. Immediately, spouses are like, get this thing, right?
Right.
And so, anyways, those are some of the 6 mountains that we help companies overcome very rapidly in as little as 4 weeks. And then know-how then becomes this digital plumbing that really facilitates how that way that their business operates really tangibly put into their processes, systems, workflows, and kind of standards kind of powers activity in each department of the company. And the last thing I'll say is, and really helps that owner make the shift, that proverbial shift from being in the business to being on the business.
Right. So walk us through like what this would look like. What is this? Every department and every department's SOPs? Is it just documents? Is it, videos? Is it pictures? Like what should a restoration company kind of expect? If they're like, hey, dang, you know what? Yeah, I do need to do this. Which, by the way, off camera, we were talking about the timeline for some of this stuff. And I think that this is really interesting because I know that one of the biggest things that holds people back is the timeline. They don't want to spend 6 months, 8 months putting everything together. And you said that you've got systems in place that sometimes within 4 weeks, you could have the entire, not one department, but the entire organization systemized and ready to rock and roll within 4 weeks, which is utterly insane. First of all, right? But so, that kind of floating around in people's heads, because I wanted to highlight that because I think it's so important, because one of the biggest things that holds people back is just the time. So what does it look like? What does the software look like? What can people expect to dump in there? Is it just going to be some boring Google Doc, or what can we expect?
No, hey, that's a great question. So KnowHow is a native iPhone and Android app. It's on every tablet, it's on every browser, it's a cloud-based software. And when people download KnowHow and when they interact with KnowHow, generally people are like, this is a lot more like Instagram and like YouTube than it is like any tool that I've been using. KnowHow it's a fresh, modern, easy to use product. We're one of these first kind of like San Francisco-esque companies that's come into the restoration space. And so, design and user interaction and overall just all the little subtleties, let's just say, there's a lot of polish on the edges, right? So the user interface and the user experience, everyone will find out right away is really top shelf, right? The second thing is that our passion, like I would even say our obsession, is the frontline worker, meaning, creating a tool that is a lot more like something they use outside of work than the stuff they use inside of work. So that's just like the product tangibly as a software. Now, once they come into KnowHow, really, I would say if you're a worker, KnowHow is being used for like search-based, just-in-time queries, meaning like, hey, it's been a while since I've used this certain type of equipment. I just need to remember how to swap out the filters. So those kind of just-in-time queries. Or it's things like, it could be like they wake up and like, what do I need to do today? Where do I need to be? And what aspects of company standards do I need to deliver? And within those standards, right, it's, there's tasks that are associated in other software products that I use. And so really KnowHow really becomes that single path, that single roadmap that doesn't just say, this is what you need to do and how I want you to do it, but it's more importantly, it weaves together all those other tools and software products that are part of how things get done. So when we talk about like how the sausage is made, so to speak, you talk about how we actually
Right.
take a company through that. So really what that looks like is this. It's built on a premise. Here's the premise. Building processes sucks, right? It's not fun. And,
Right.
yeah, and we really believe that our average client thinks building processes sucks. The second thing is that their idea of a good time is not sitting in front of a Word document, tapping their chin saying, how do I do what I do? Right?
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I don't think anybody listening to the show right now is like, man, I can't wait to get to the office because I really want to bang out these SOPs. Yeah. I don't think that's a conversation anybody's having.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, that's one of the first things, right? Is these premises. Another premise is that we believe that as a software company, so our species of software, Rico, is we are software as a service. So what I mean by that is we have a lot more in common with like the bellman at a front desk of a hotel than like some like super powerful software company that's been here forever, right? What that means is KnowHow is a lot more like, what time would you like those towels? More than like, that's just the way it is, man, right?
Right.
And so at the end of the day, we really are very service oriented because we believe our clients are busy. They've got a lot on the go. They've got a lot on their plates. And the reality is that we've had to find creative ways of helping them to move their know-how from their brains into a more scalable environment like our tool. So what does that look like practically? Number one, it's a lot easier to see what's wrong with something than it is to define the way you do it. So we have hundreds of pre-written industry template processes and systems that are free to our clients, meaning that they can come in and look dozens of content, mitigation processes, everything from like, you name it, to do packouts, to everything. And that's every remediation service that's into sales and marketing and HR and you name it, into all the behind the scenes stuff. And then again, if you're ever sick of like answering questions on how to do things in the software products you're paying for, we've mapped out pretty much every software product in the industry. So in the same place where they get instructions on how to set the alarm and how to deliver a category 2 water loss and how to install a shark bite and how to do flood cuts, the same tool is like how to add that report to next year. You know what I'm saying? Because we
Right.
believe that there are so many powerful software tools in the industry that really do a great job. Sometimes a worker just forgets, when do I use that tool and how do I use that tool? And so that's where we also help out. So basically what it looks like is a company gets paired with a process expert from our team. So someone who Monday to Friday, all they do is they help busy labor-based companies like restoration companies. That's all they do. Monday to Friday is they help systematize those companies. They become your project manager, kind of your accountability partner, and kind of like your executive assistant for a period of time. And so what we tell our clients is that you will identify a few subject matter experts on your team, and for a period as short as 4 weeks, they will dedicate at least 45 minutes a day to working with our team to move what's in their mind into a tool that is going to help them take back 40% of their time. And so that's a big focus, because our fifth principle is this, is that we believe that to grow, management and the subject matter experts on your team, they need more time. And the only
Yep.
way you're going to get more time is not to negotiate with your spouse. The way you're going to get more time is you need to eliminate unnecessary re-explaining. And that's a big part of it. So through a very guided, a very structured, and a very proven format, we take busy restoration companies and we standardize how they do things by a combination of modifying templates, interviewing out content, training you how to use a very easy to use tool to build the content yourself. And if you're interested, we even have the world's first machine learning driven process author, where you can say, all right, machine, how do I do a tailgate meeting? And so there's a lot of things that we do to try to get you over that first mountain. Remember the first mountain, documenting how you want things done. And then what we do is then we train your entire workforce how to use your knowledge hub, right? And so then we support with that. Whether you got 1,000 staff or 10 staff, we have that capacity. And then going forward, we're like a software with a front desk where we're always connecting with our clients when they're saying, hey, I'm thinking about getting into bio. And would you help me standardize a program? So rather than like figuring it out, I can hit the ground running day one. Or I'm thinking about getting into reconstruction. You know what I'm saying? And so we have clients who come to us and they say, hey, we're thinking about expanding to Arizona. Hey, we're thinking about buying another office. And we say, perfect. Why don't you just copy paste your systems, and from day one they'll have playbook. And they're like, amazing.
Right.
So that's kind of
that's
kind of how
and that's the idea, right? That's the idea of this is what software should do, right? Is to make your life a little bit easier, a little bit less stress-free, because I think like we've all been there where you know that you've answered the exact same question 4,500 times. And tomorrow when you walk into the office, you're probably going to answer it again. Right. So, and if you can go ahead and get what's out of your head and get out of, get what's out of your top employees, right? Your top team members, if you can get what's out of their head and what makes them so great, and they're contributing to this amazing machine. And now it's digitized and it's standardized and anybody can have access to it at any given time. That's where you start buying all of this time back. And you're like, oh, this is really nice, right? Now I can start working on my business. I had, these marketing plans, or I had this, or I had that. Then that would have been time better spent, where you have a better dividend instead of, answering these exact same questions over and over and over again. But I think that one of the biggest takeaways is knowing that regardless of if it's in your office or if you decide to open up another office or whatever the case may be, you can plug somebody in. And if they can read and if they can kind of like follow a checklist, you should be in pretty damn good shape. Right?
Yeah. And it's interesting, when we went into the pandemic, a lot of the younger generations, a lot of like the research on generations and things like that indicated that we think this upcoming workforce might be the most entrepreneurial workforce we've ever seen. But the reality is that for large segments, especially kind of marginalized segments, a lot of, groups that I would say are kind of marginalized groups tend to come in and fill a lot of the labor roles, is that they actually almost did a complete 180, and now they prefer really consistency and predictability and structure, because they really want that, I would say, that predictability in a workplace. And so I would say never has there been a workforce based on our research that is more oriented and more, I would say, adaptable to, there's a very specific way that we want this done, and it's captured in this checklist. And by the way, it looks like TikTok. And so, so it's primed. Like, I mean, there's a reason why, we entered the market at this timing, is because there's factors that are much bigger than how stubborn a person is, that are saying this is just how the worker prefers to work. But let me put a couple other things that we're very passionate about. So one day, a lot of your listeners probably are listening and watching all this, all this M&A, all this mergers and acquisition stuff happening in the industry. And it's hot right now, right?
Hot topic,
man. Boom. I just came from RIA. Man, you walk around that floor and like, you see the big boom, you see ATI, you see Blue Sky, you see, I see these, like, these are powerhouse companies, right? And they are shopping. And everybody, is thinking about like, how do I build a sellable business? And I can tell you that one of the most valuable things that you can do is to remove yourself as essential how the business runs. And how do you do that? Is that you establish systems, right? You establish processes. And then what's more is that you enforce them. As Gina Wickham said, chapter 7 of EOS, right? He says, process component is that you need to establish the way you want things done. But then what everybody forgets is you need to get everybody to follow the process. And people will say, well, I got this guy who's been on my team for 20 years. He's been a drywaller longer than I've been alive, and he won't do it this way. Fire him. Right. You're like, what? It's like, are you here to be Switzerland and just keep everybody happy? Or are you trying to build a sellable business? And a sellable business is a business that doesn't require you to operate. It's improved when you're there. You're an accelerant in your business. but you're not a requirement to your business because you set the expectation that there is a way that we do things here. And it's no different than when you step on the field of a football game. It's like, there's a way we run this play, and I appreciate you're a great athlete, but I'm just telling you, everybody is running this play a certain way. And if you run your own play, you're going to look like a fool and it's not going to work. You're going to create a lot of chaos in our business. And you know what? Maybe there's like a pickup league somewhere you can just run your own patterns, but here we have a playbook. And that coach dominates. And that coach could actually step off the field and their team would just keep running plays and they'd have a great time. And you know what? And they wouldn't even know the coach was gone. But when the coach is there, it heightens performance. And so what we've seen, and we've talked to, brokers and M&A professionals, that a company that has, I'll tell you, like, this is one of those behind the curtain things, is that when you establish systems and processes, and hey, we hope you choose KnowHow because we think we're the best in the industry to help you do that, you can add almost an entire multiple from a valuation standpoint just by having your business systematized. The other thing that when you're selling a business that is very, very complicated and is always tenuous is what's called the earnout. And the earnout is that period of time where the new purchaser says, I'll buy it, but I need you to stay on for 18 months. And you'll say, well, hold on a second. Like, I worked like a dog to get to this point where it's even sellable. Then I went through the whole, due diligence process. And now I got to stick around for 18 months. That is not what I sold to my spouse. Right. And so one of the best ways.
We're supposed to be in Tahiti right now. I'm not going to be clocking in on Monday. What are you talking about? Right.
Exactly. And then you're in a world where, apparently you got to keep running this business, but you don't have any authority any longer. Right. And so you're just like this, like, no man for months. So the way to avoid that is you establish the systems and processes and get your business to run on that. Let us help you, because when you sit down and you show them your business, you show them how it operates, you take them through the classic lineup of all your vehicles and all that stuff. And you say, this whole entire machine runs on systems and processes that everybody's been trained in, and we've refined and we continue to refine. And I think that I add a lot of value as the owner, but the reality is that someone could step into this system and they could keep things running and could scale it up if they had the resources and energy, because it's all been systematized. And so I'll tell you, here's the dirty secret. Well, that's not a dirty secret. It's just a grim reality, is that when a company gets bought by a PE firm or an M&A acquisition, and they lack the systems and processes, well, one of the first things that they do is they say, great, we're going to be able to buy this business on a discount, make this person have a 16 to 18 month earnout. And then as soon as we own that asset, we're going to systematize it because we're going to immediately add value to this asset. And so what we would say is, if you're in the business of buying businesses, call us, because we will add immediate value to that asset. If you're in the business of hoping to sell your business in a couple of years from now, call us, because we can help you add tremendous value to your business, give you the ability to work on the business rather than in the business. But what's more than that is be able to cut down that earnout time, because at the end of the day, the business doesn't rely on you. And again, you bring a lot of value. It's improved when you're there, but you've really built an elegant, scalable machine that in a sense can print money without you.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a question, right? I've always thought that the best practice should be, if you're going to get into business and start creating a business that is sellable, right? That's attractive to someone potentially, just coming in and saying, yeah, you know what, this is an amazing business. Oh yeah, great. I'm ready. Let's go. Right. Like, that should be the end goal. It doesn't mean that necessarily that you want to exit, but just to have that option is really nice. Also, just for your mental bandwidth, right? Like, if you've got a beautifully running, well-oiled machine that's bringing in, revenue and profits without your participation, because your participation now is basically already been documented, like, that's a pretty damn good life, right?
Yeah.
And also, you're never going to really be pressured into selling. You could probably demand a higher price. There's so many benefits that come to that. So, but the question now becomes, is at what point should an organization look at KnowHow And, because there's probably people that are listening that are saying, you know what, well, it's just me and my cousin. We just started the company. We don't really have processes. We're only doing water. We're not doing mold. We're not doing fire. We want to get into all of that stuff, but we don't even know how to get into that stuff because we don't have these systems. So you see how this kind of goes down a huge rabbit hole of questions, right? Mm-hmm. So is this something that you believe that smaller organizations, if they haven't implemented anything, that they should implement this, or is this only for like the bigger dogs in the field?
Mm-hmm. You know what? It's a great question. And what I would say is that for that small guy who says, it's just me and my cousin and we're getting things going, I will tell you that the biggest obstacle to you to become a systems-driven company where you can actually have this beautiful business kind of running there and trucking along, making money for you, are the habits that you form along the way to that growth that tell you, that become, in a sense, the muscle memory of how you run a business. And it sounds kind of odd, but the sooner that you can get into the rhythm of being someone who is submissive to a systematic way of doing things, the faster it's going to be for you to be able to, in a sense, standardize what you do and hand it off to that first hire. So I'm a big believer in standardize as soon as possible, and so that you can hand off things quickly. Now, I will say, I'll be very upfront about it. So at KnowHow, our KnowHow starts at 10 seats, basically 10 people. So if you have 2 people, at the end of the day, you're stepping into an environment that has room to grow, right?
Right.
All right. So I'll just
that's
be very
a benefit.
Candid. Hey, you know what? Hey, we're ready for you, right? You come to us and we're like, we're ready for you to grow, man, right? But I would say that really, we call them trigger moments, Rico. And so there are triggers that cause a person to say, oof, I think I'm going to need that KnowHow thing, right? I'll give you a trigger. Trigger is you listen to something like this. And a guy like Rico, who's been there, done that, and he's been successful at it, says, hey, take it from me and this smart guy I'm talking to, maybe a different guest, I don't know about me, but
I think you qualify. I think you qualify.
Right? Take it from me that you really need to think about, how you actually provide your staff with clarity. So they're not like, how did you want this done again? It's like, oh man, I didn't sleep last night. How do I want that done? You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, the trigger moment where you listen to, some people, they picked up a book. Look at this, product placement, they picked up a book like Fraction. Some people, they pick up a book like this one right here, right? And so there's a moment where they read Burn Harnish's Scaling Up, or they read Getting Things Done, or they read the Checklist Manifesto, and something just says, boom, I got to do that, right? And so there's a trigger event where you're influenced by a piece of knowledge. Sometimes people being a consultant. There's a lot of great consultants in the industry, right? And, we work closely with people like the group at Business Mentors, the group at Violand. You bring in someone to say, hey, I need some accountability, but I also need to add some maturity to my business. And so at that point, they're just going to tell you, they're going to say, what are you doing half of your week? Standardize that, right?
Right.
That's what they're going to say. And then they're going to say, we need to start building some robustness, we need to build some infrastructure under your company. And that's a trigger moment where people are like, they're like, have you ever heard of KnowHow? Yep, I heard of KnowHow, right? It's kind of like, yeah, I'm supposed to eat vegetables, right? And
right. It's a pretty good example, actually.
And it's like, yeah, breakfast burritos get you so far, right? And then another trigger is, frankly, we just call it just growth, right? The reality is that there is a tipping point of what we call operational chaos. And oftentimes it's the first time that the manager puts a layer of management between them and their direct reports, that they realize that they have less control and they have less influence on how the business operates. And at that point, the reality is to use your term, Rico, the telephone game becomes a reality. And that's where, they pick up the phone and they say, you know what, I need to be able to get maximum horsepower out of my management team. My team is just using them like a frequently asked question machine, or I'm burning out. I just went through my second operations manager in the last 12 months because they're like, I can't do it all. And they're like, and you were willing to do it all because you own it all, but right. I'm not you. And right. So I would say that's another trigger moment where they're thinking about bringing in that operations lead, that management level. And then I would say another trigger is when a person wants to go multi-location, they want to go multi-location. Another trigger is when a company wants to expand services. They want to get into reconstruction. They want to get into to dealing with hospitals or something like that. And either because the client, aka the insurer, aka the claim, aka the hospital, says, prove to me that you're not going to totally screw this up. And one of the
Right.
best ways to prove to them is say, all right, well, just here you go. That's my
Yeah.
phone.
Here you go.
Why
Yeah.
don't you just type? Why don't you just type in Allstate? And that is
Right.
not. That's not. Those aren't just our water processes. Those are our water processes for Allstate, and we would build some for you. And so when a person shows up at blah 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 Memorial, they'll just type in Memorial, and how you want everything done will be in that technician's hand in Portuguese. And so when the business takes those big steps up, and then for big companies, honestly, I have been in the industry for a long time, working on how to get the French fries to taste the same way.
And let me just like really just like stop there for a second, because, selling is, nothing happens unless there's a sale made. And as a salesperson, which is what really everybody's role is to some degree, is to transfer that degree of confidence when you're having a conversation with a brand new prospect, especially if it's like a hospital or if it's some kind of an institution or whatever. To have something that you would normally have on you anyways. It's not like, wait a second, hold that thought. Let me go out to the truck and I have this like crazy 3-ring, 4-inch binder. You're like, and with confidence and with a straight face for you to be able to say, hey, I'm so happy that you asked, but check this out. Boom. Yeah. And they look at that like any regular person who's ever dealt with any kind of procedure would look at that and be like, oh, wow, these people really have their ducks in a row. And if you're put in a position to where, they're asking you this kind of questioning and that was your response, and they're asking somebody else the same exact question or express that kind of concern, and they don't have the exact same response, like clearly you are the winner. And more than likely you're going to be the one who locks in that account. And these are like these small little games. And number one, I think personally make you so much better as an entrepreneur, make your business that much more attractive, but you're also giving confidence. Like we're talking all this time, right? With all this time, we've really been talking about in the first portion, we've been talking about company culture to some degree. And what our responsibilities are as a good owner is to provide the tools to make our people better people. It's kind of our responsibility to make sure that when they walk in, they've got all the ammunition, all the tools. So I just really wanted to go ahead and unpack that, because I didn't want people to kind of listen to it and be like, oh, well, it's a nice little sales pitch. Like the implications that has is massive.
No, you know your stuff, Rico. You're a good dot connector. And what you're intuitively pointing out to your listener is, back in the day, when I was a senior executive in a large trades franchise system, and we would train people, we would say trust. We used the visual of the trust being a triangle. And so I didn't come up with this. It was the organization had this, and I think it rings true. Is that trust has 3 components, like the 3 points of a triangle. And if you achieve all 3, then you're going to build trust. And so one of the first ones is what we call a common sense of purpose, right? A common sense of purpose is that whole discovery engagement where you're understanding the client's needs, the scope of the work, and you're able to clearly articulate, what that is. And so they feel confident, that you understand what they're talking about. But then the other one is competence, and that competence, how do you just like communicate competence? If my building just burned down, this is not the time I want you to sound like a big smarty pants, being like, well,
Right.
I know you're staring at your wedding albums right now, but you see that soot? That soot actually means that you had food. And they're like,
Right.
great, like, thanks, you callous jerk, right? No, the way that you communicate competence in a moment like that is exactly what you just said. Is that what our clients do is they say, well, how do you clean this? Like this is a family heirloom. You say, check this out, okay? This is our process for how we clean fabrics. They look at it within your private branded KnowHow hub, and they're like, okay, this is clearly not your first rodeo, and you got it. Okay, I also noticed that all of my hockey, no problem. That's soft fabrics. Check it out. That's a process for cleaning soft fabrics. Okay, and you communicate competence, and so when a person has trust established, then you can move into that what we call that advocate or that kind of expert advisor sales role, and you can be much more efficient. And you can say, here's what we're going to do, right? And so you have that common sense of purpose, you have that competence, and the third one in that model was character. And if you were to say, well, okay, hold on a second, character, how do I communicate character? It's very easy for us to decide to be able to point out what corrodes character. And the things that corrode character, I would say, are things like showing up late and communicating inconsistency. A thing like, for example, stumbling on your words and saying, maybe I don't know if I can commit to that or not. Right? Another thing that communicates character or the lack of character, I would say, is just simply just like clearly just winging it. And the person's like, are you writing this down because am I ever going to see you again, Mr. Estimator?
Right.
So at the end of the day, what you aptly touched on, Rico, which I think is very apt, is that you want as a company to be able to establish trust, and so that your staff can be expressions of trust. In franchising, what we would say is it's all about promise delivery. It's all about promise delivery, and so there's promise delivery to the worker. So when someone joins the company, I've made a promise to them that they're going to have an experience of employment. And the same thing is to the customer. We're making a brand promise. We're making a promise of delivery to them. And what that boils down to is the ability for me, whether me, aka my brand, is a 140-pound young woman named Maria, right, wearing my logo, or whether it's a tall glass of water named Jim. At the end of the day, what's consistent in those two, the common denominator, is my logo is on site.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, how do you make sure that those French fries taste the same, meaning that the message is consistent? And if there's another way out there, I'm interested, right? But what I know is that step one, you ask these 3 questions, and that is the way we do it. And it doesn't matter who's doing it, but the first thing you do is we ask those 3. So some of our clients call it, the 5-point trust conversation, or the 9-point scope discussion, right? And that's just the process. And it allows you to be also be able to manage performance, because when things go wrong, generally, this is a whole nother conversation. But
Right.
most people, when they come to us and I say, well, how do you know you're having process problems? They'd say, well, because we're reactive. We're just constantly reactive. Is that I can't even think of one proactive thing we do in this business, right? I think we once ordered printer paper from Staples, right? But like, other than that, we haven't done anything proactive for years,
Right.
right? And so we don't know if something was done the wrong way until either Liberty Mutual chews us out, someone gets hurt, or we get a call back. And
Right.
honestly, that's the only time we know if like we didn't do things according to plan. And so at the end of the day, companies that want to get out of that, the way that you do it is you set a standard. Does that mean that everyone's going to follow your standard? I will tell you, Rico, as a person who is in the software business, I would love to say that every one of our customers' staff use KnowHow every moment of the day. But the reality is that some people struggle. Even when you have a standardized way of doing it, they struggle to get their staff to do it. But here's the kicker, is that when you're managing humans and you're managing for performance, accountability is so critical. And what corrodes accountability is when you lack a standard, right? Just think about a parent who's trying to, enforce something that hasn't said, hey, in our house, you don't talk that way. At the end of the day, when somebody steps out of the line, to be able to come in and say, what happened? They say, well, I was talking to Mark and he was here yesterday and he said, this is how to do it. But now Lindsay's here and she's telling me to do it this way. It's not my fault. How do you hold
Right. Totally
accountability?
different game.
How do you hold accountability? But you walk on site and you say, all right, hey, let's huddle up here. So here at Bob's Restoration, hey, there's a way we do flood cuts. And this is not how we do flood cuts. Okay, everyone pull out your device, type in flood. Okay, let's walk through this. Who did this work? Okay, step 2. And it's just like in accountability, process doesn't mean everyone follows it, but a clear standard makes accountability easy. And when you can hold the line, it allows you to be able to impart a standard in your workforce. And some people, they don't want to work in an environment where there's standards. They want to work in the Wild West. They want to be a gunslinger. And you know what? Let them have it, right?
Yeah, and if that's the kind of company you want to run, and
Mm-hmm.
then so be it. Again, look, there's
Yeah.
however it is that every individual decides to run their company, that's on them,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you are looking to run an organization that you're proud of, if you want to not be kept up at night,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to maybe one day pass on something of value, forget
Mm-hmm.
about selling, but pass on something of value to your children and not give them an additional headache in life. Maybe having some stuff and some ideals, some standards written down for your organization, may just be of a little bit of value. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe.
Yeah. And we at KnowHow, we have not yet figured out how to like digitally force your staff to like check a box. But what we can do is we can say, look, how do you make it so that the way you want that client meeting delivered, the way you want those books closed, the way you want the shop packed up, the way you want the trucks to go out, that a person can access that faster than they can check the weather. And they can access it in a format that's in the language they want to read in, with rich visual images. So there's no lack of clarity on how I want it done. And when necessary, maybe there's a short video to just kind of walk a person through what that looks like. And when the step requires them to maybe take an action in other software, just click the button, right, and
Right.
launch that other product. And so, at the end of the day, it's all about accessibility. And then for that person who's sitting in their office, who's finally getting some airspace to pursue those large commercial accounts or those large loss opportunities, or to think about how they can maybe finance an expansion of the warehouse, to have on a secondary monitor, basically a dashboard that's just showing them, is their staff doing things the way I want things done when I'm not there? It's a different way of
That's
running
what it's all about.
It's a different way of running a business. I would say
Exactly.
it's running a business as opposed to just being an overworked cog in the machine that you build.
Yeah, constantly reacting to your business, right? It's a totally different thing. It's most people that got into business, regardless of the business, it was because they wanted some freedom. They wanted to do something that was meaningful to them. They wanted to enrich their lives. They didn't want to be sucked dry with the demands of the business on a day to day. And if you notice how many times you do things over and over and over again, there's a lot of things in your business that once you start, putting pen to paper, or giving it just a little bit of thought, like you said, 45 minutes a day. Yeah. You can get a lot done in 45 minutes a day if that's what you have the laser focus at. Yeah. And then having software that can help you be your second brain for the viewers out there in Restoration Nation that have been following with the podcast knows how much I talk about having that secondary brain. Like, how do you get what you have in your head and your thoughts and then put it away somewhere to where you can go back and reference it and have your team members reference it. That's really what it's about. And Leighton, man, there's so much here that we can continue to talk about. Yeah. So, but at this point, what I'd like to do is I want to go ahead and let our listeners know where they can go ahead and find you. If social media, right, LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, if someone wanted to reach out to you personally, like, Leighton is like a super smart dude, like I want to connect with him. Where can they find you? And then if they want to learn more about KnowHow, where could they go?
Yeah, as long as you don't mind tempering your expectations, I'm on LinkedIn at just Leighton T. Healey, and connect, reach out. Hey, I've been there. Like I've been the guy struggling to just retain one crew, all the way up to playing a role with a leadership team running 7,000 laborers. I've experienced it, right? And I run a company, right? I run a company. One of the things that some people like to joke about is that KnowHow runs on KnowHow, right? We're a very systems-driven company, right? And right. So you can reach out to me, hit me up on LinkedIn, no problem. And then in terms of KnowHow, what I would say is one of the best ways to interact with us today is we're a very intentional company. Like we take the work of trying to help companies win with the labor worker very seriously. Go to whyworkersquit.com. Whyworkersquit.com, you get a free copy of our ebook. If you're a physical copy type person, you can go to Amazon and type in Why Workers Quit, and you get a nice, Jeff Bezos will drop a copy on your doorstep, a nice hardcover. But that's a great way to interact with us. And then, but if you'd really like to take a look under the hood, just go to tryknowhow.com. Tryknowhow.com and click on the button that say, I'd like an expert to just give me a quick call. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, just tell us about your business. And we know that becoming a more systematic, more process-driven company is really more a matter of being in the right time, the right mindset, the right position as a business. And so, we're not here to just, sell everybody and their cat on using our software. We realize that for many of our clients, we say, hey, you know what? why don't you read our book? And, why don't you pick up a book like Traction? And if you really want to think about running your business in a more systematic way, let's talk. And we have an entire team of people that, today is April 21st. We have an entire team of people that before you even step into June, your business could be running like a standardized machine. And so we do work fast. And so for someone who's motivated, they can go to tryknowhow.com or ping me directly, and we'll connect when it's convenient for you. And if it's the right fit, we're here to help.
Awesome. And also, Restoration Nation, we've got something special for you as well. We're going to have a special link where you're going to get a small little gift to kind of help you on your journey. And that way it can kind of alleviate some of the, if any, kind of apprehension of doing the right thing. So make sure that you check out the video description as well as in the show notes, or if you go to restorationdomination.com and you check out this episode, there's going to be all of the company information as well as the books listed and mentioned on this particular podcast. All of the links, all the information that you could possibly want and or desire is going to be available on restorationdomination.com. And then, just find this particular episode. On that note, Leighton, man, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate having you on. It's been a blast. We got to do it again.
Let's do it. But in Cuba, right? You and me.
In Cuba, yes. Jokingly, we were talking about it would be great to have a part 2 Restoration Domination interview in Cuba, that would be tons of fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, hey, when it works for you, it works for me. Thanks, Rico, and I hope your listeners were able to just put a couple things in their tool belt. And thanks for the time.
Awesome, man. And Restoration Nation, make sure that you go ahead and check out Try KnowHow, and go ahead and find all the information as mentioned on the links that I have provided for you. And just remember, as always, go out there, hustle, hack, and dominate.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Hook up with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Restoration Domination to catch video interviews, highlights, and behind-the-scenes content. And follow your host at Rico Garcia Jr. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.